David W. is from Los Angeles, California, and his home group is the Fledgling Society. David will be speaking on Step 2, It Only Seemed Hopeless, for 45 minutes, followed by a 20-minute Q&A. David, is an honor and privilege having you with us today, and we thank you for setting aside the time to share your life with us. Welcome.
Wow, thank you. My name is David, and I'm a person with alcoholism. Woo, you guys really know what you're doing over here. Way to pull heartstrings and get the energy of recovery flowing. I heard in the format you said this is not a home group, but it sure feels like one. Thank you for having me. Truly, I appreciate the energy and the opportunity to share about the transformation that has occurred since I stepped into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in September of 2006. I do have a home group here in West Los Angeles called the Fledgling Society. We have a big book workshop that meets on Wednesday nights over Zoom, and we have a couple different meetings and a couple different fellowships. So I found my lane here. I found a thing that I love to do, and I've been doing it pretty consistently. You know, in 17 and a half years, I've certainly gone through periods of enthusiasm and periods of burnout, periods when I wanted to sponsor the whole world, and periods when I didn't want to touch anyone. So welcome to the journey. And hopefully you'll find something here that resonates with you. My recovery is mine, and it feels personal, and it feels unique to me. And I want to invite you to find something that feels unique to you. We've got like a formula here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We've got a roadmap to recovery. And for me, it was critical to abandon self and submit to the roadmap. But after having been here for a while, I also see the value in learning how to branch out and learning how to make it unique to me. So when I take people through the process, what we do is encourage folks to dive into the message from 1939 and then also to put it into the context of our current lives in 2024. So I like to blend spirituality with science. I like to blend yesteryear with tomorrow. And I like to try to live in the present as much as I can. And I'm not an expert at the present moment. I certainly have a mind that is overactive and makes a lot of predictions. And I know that I'm doing well when my mind is making positive predictions rather than really dark, negative thoughts. So I learned here in AA about something we call the spiritual condition. And the spiritual condition describes my internal state, which essentially is a proxy for my connectedness to God. And the way that I can best measure that is by looking at how well I'm getting along with my fellows. So I'm certainly wired for threat vigilant, I should say. I'm wired for anxiety, and I'm wired for relational rupture. There's a part of me that's competitive. There's a part of me that deeply wants to crush my competition. And there's a part of me that just wants to love and be shoulder to shoulder. And I know I'm in recovery when I'm doing the love and shoulder to shoulder thing. So it's been an awesome journey. It seems like we have a topic this evening. It's late morning here in Los Angeles, but we're all around the world. So grateful for this opportunity and leveraging the technology to all connect. When I think about speaking on a step, it's somewhat challenging because there's a lot of ways one could go. I could talk about my experience with the second step when I got here in 2006. In those first 2 years, I have very pronounced memories of, my original run through the process and my original experiences, and they shaped the notes that are in my book. And I've got the experience of studying the literature and having what feels like a pretty good mastery of the 1939 message. And it wouldn't be difficult for me to break down lines and dissect the literature and connect pages and do that too. I'm somewhat cautious of that today because I've done a lot of it. And then, of course, there's the current experience with the second step. We are in a workshop, and I'm currently in the inventory process. I just wrote a fear inventory, and I have some current experiences with the steps. So I'll try to share a little bit of all of it. I don't love the personal life story thing, but it feels important to drop a few nuggets of my experience just to let you know that I belong here, to let you know that I've done what's necessary to stay here. I am a person with alcoholism. I'm a person before I'm an alcoholic. And I do identify with the condition that's described in our book. I definitely come from some genetic legacy and have the biology, I believe, that makes me susceptible to this condition. And I know that because, as soon as I took my first drink when I was 11, it did something for me. It wasn't like, oh, this is aversive, this is gross. I was like, oh, this is memorable. I assigned it value. I mean, I could remember like the shoes I was wearing, who I was with. I can remember all the details because the condition that I have is such where if something is rewarding, what we call in neuroscience dopaminergic, I'll store it. I'll store that valuable experience so that if I need it again, I can cue it up and essentially repeat the behavior. And I didn't know all of this, and some of what I know about alcoholism I learned from reading the book. Some of it I learned from listening to other people, just hanging out in AA since 2006, and some of it I've learned from science. There's some really good stuff in the scientific world which helps me understand how my brain works and how my mind works. Just a little sidebar, the brain and the mind are not the same thing. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we talk about the mind, my thinking. And of course, my thinking is influenced by my brain, which is connected to my body, which is connected to my gut, which is connected to the alcohol that I drink and the other substances I consume. So when I got here in 2006, I had 5 felony convictions. I had never had a real job. I had no college degrees, and I had a whole lot of stories. I couldn't wait to tell them. As soon as you gave me the microphone, I was going to let you know about the people that I run with and the 18-year aged whiskeys that I drank. And I was going to let you know about all the escapades. And, it's fun to share stories, and I'm sure I'll pull out one or two. But I found after being here for quite a while that the real story of interest is the story of how many thousands men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And I have aligned myself with that story, and that's the story that I'm here to tell today. I want to kick off by reading something from the foreword to the first edition. This is part of the original message. So 1939, it says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." This passage was particularly significant to me. I remember when I was new and hearing people talk about the hopelessness of addiction, the hopelessness of alcoholism, the hopelessness of the condition. And, when I got sober, people were describing the hopeless state as seemingly, as in it only seemed that way. And I found that to be a potent message of hope. And it tells me that certain things might seem to be absolute in my mind. Certain things might seem to be true, but they only seem that way. When I took inventory, I learned that a lot of my resentments, some of them are fancied. A lot of my fears are conjured up by my own thinking, by my own mind. And a lot of the stuff that I experience in my life isn't truly in alignment with what actually is. And that's what the doctor's opinion describes as delusional, full flight from reality, right? And I've spent a lot of years learning about my own mind and learning how to temper it so that I'm not susceptible to my own thinking patterns. So this concept of a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body really kicked off my step journey. It felt like I needed to learn more about the mind and about the body, but I also needed to look at my experience and really dive into the unmanageability of my condition. I used to think unmanageability meant that I was not able to show up on time, that I couldn't juggle all the different things that I needed to juggle, all the cases that I caught, and all of the near-death experiences that I had, I was pretty sure that unmanageability captured the behavioral manifestations. But it turns out unmanageability for me describes my internal state, and I can't control my emotional nature. I can't control my thoughts, and I am highly susceptible to what I like to call going dark. If you have what I have, you'll understand what I mean, going dark, right? Getting into the cave of self, not being able to step out into the sunlight of the spirit, and making very negative predictions about what might be. So I got this message of hope throughout my journey in the steps. And in my opinion, the second step comes in a lot of different places. It's one of the steps that's clearly not referred to in the big book. So it's a process for me of collecting hope along the way. And in the foreword to the first edition, when it said a seemingly hopeless state, I started to get a lot of hope and realized that the hopelessness wasn't permanent, that I could gain access to what our literature calls permanent recovery. I can get brought to a place where I no longer suffer, where I overcome a spiritual malady, and I get to trust my thinking again. And I got excited, y'all. I've been excited for the most part ever since. And, when I went through the book with the guy who took me through, and we met every week, and he showed me the original message, he gave me assignments ahead of time, and the assignments were to read and underline. So when I connected with this person, we would sit and go over what I was reading, share what I had underlined. He would point some things out to me. We would read the material, and I would get clear on the original message. This was very helpful to me because I started sponsoring people, and I just started doing with them what he was doing with me, which was essentially sharing the message of 1939, which is the message of hope. It's the message of freedom, and it's the message of recovery from alcoholism. And, I have a egocentric state, which means that I want to be the teacher. I want to be the authority, and I want to be the one that solves other people's problems. And for me to be able to have a roadmap, as I called it, to show other people precisely how to recover, was key. It says after that, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So I learned how to be crystal clear. I learned how to be definitive. I learned how to be, to say what I mean and mean what I say here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been able to take that, to other areas of my life and just learn how to be someone who is, concise, try to be brief. And I try to speak, from the heart, whenever possible. So when I got sober in 2006, I had track record, criminal background, a lot of wreckage. I got sober with $80,000 worth of debt. And one of the biggest challenges for me was being able to conceptualize a path, not just for recovery, but for my life. What was I going to do? Who am I? Who I'm not became very evident. I was wearing certain types of clothes and being obsessed with certain types of music and just playing a role in my treatment center, which was a nonprofit treatment center here in Los Angeles, California. And, slowly but surely, the version of me that really is truly in alignment with my core self and this power started to show up. When I got sober, people were talking about the Michelangelo statue, and they asked David, right? They asked, how did you create David? And he said, I just chipped away at everything that wasn't David. And David showed up. And that really, really resonated with me. And I realized that the steps were going to be a process of me chipping away at everything that wasn't me. And again, you guys have probably heard that 100 times because the name of this meeting is addition by subtraction, right? So removing what wasn't me and allowing the real me to show up. I was pretty sure that I needed to add income, add degrees, add details, but it was very clear that I needed to engage in a process of subtraction. In order for me to move through the steps, I needed a clear picture of where I was headed. And that's what the second step did for me. So when I went through the book with this guy, everything that offered me a message of hope, I underlined. So I'm of the idea that the first two steps are from the cover page really to chapter 5. And I was told that as I go through the book, I should underline anything that I relate to in terms of the problem and anything that I relate to in terms of the solution. I don't believe that the solution becomes highly accessible in the second step. There are promises in chapter 4 and throughout, but I'm really just identifying what the solution is. And, for me, I saw clearly on that I wanted what's described as being recovered from that seemingly hopeless state, and that I was looking to live a life where I wasn't dominated by my own thinking and I could navigate the world with confidence. One of my favorite lines is in Bill's story on page 14. He talks about feeling lifted up. He said, there was an utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. So I started having what the book calls sudden and profound spiritual experiences. Sometimes people use the term white light. I can never say that I saw the white light, but I had some dramatic internal shifts. When I was 1 year sober, I went and hiked the highest point in the continental United States. And I remember going all the way to the top. It took 8 hours to go sit in meditation and then walking down and feeling like I was in God's hands, like I was safe. And that's the feeling that I'm after. I don't just want hope with my mind. I want a feeling in my spirit that I'm safe and protected and that no matter what adversity shows up, I'm going to be all right. That's the feeling that I'm after. I want to feel like no matter what happens, I'm going to be all right. In the worst of calamity, that I'm able to find serenity. In the worst tragic situations, I'm able to stay calm. And to me, that's a really good way to measure where I'm at internally. So I started signing up. For the promises in the big book. Every time I saw something which pointed to a solution, in chapter 2, there is a solution. It describes the problem in some great detail. It says the main problem centers in my mind rather than my body. But I also started identifying, where this is headed for me. It talks about a common solution. And, on page 25, I'm just going to read a paragraph. It says, there is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. So I didn't just have to come to believe in a power that would solve my problems. I had to come to believe that I had the condition. And that took a little bit. If you have what I have, my mind separates me from the solution. It doesn't allow me to identify with you. It looks for differences rather than similarities. And I start building a case that I don't belong here. So I had to identify with the literature and identify with my fellows. But I really had to see that if I had this condition, I didn't have a lot of really good options. Nowadays, we live in the era of harm reduction, clinical interventions, and there are actually a lot of roads to recovery. And I do not believe that there is one way. I certainly suffered from that illusion for many years. But I think I needed to, because I think what I was trying to convey is that there was probably just one way for me, because this was the only thing that ever worked for me. It's the only message that I'm qualified to carry. But in the last, 8 or so years, I've learned to become super open-minded to the possibility that people can recover in a wide range of different ways and using a wide range of different literatures, et cetera, experiences. But I got really rigid, y'all. I just want to say it. I got really rigid. I have cognitive rigidity built into my mind. My dad's a rigid man. And I have a condition which I believe to be pretty aggressive and pretty progressive. And I don't think I would have recovered on a kind of sort of maybe hang out in AA, read a little bit of this, call someone. I needed someone that sat down with me and gave me some pretty rigid AA. It was super, super important for me. And when it was my turn to carry the message, I stuck to the book, I stuck to my experience, and I took people through the process. And that allowed me to feel confident. It allowed me to be on a path. Since I've been here, since 2006, I've explored a lot of other spiritual paths in the yoga community and other communities, other spiritual communities. And I do believe that having a path is important. And that's what AA provides. It provides a path for those of us that have this condition. So there's a lot of ways to recover from alcoholism. But if you have the kind of alcoholism that's described in the book, this original message is going to resonate, hopefully. And when I say the kind of alcoholism that's described in the book, I'm talking about the one that returns to alcohol after quitting, makes firm resolutions to stop and continues to go back. The one that has a feeling of restless, irritable, and discontentedness until being able to put something in the body. So it goes on to say on page 25, when therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. So when I was sponsored through the Big Book, I was really hoping that the guy would be like really clear with me and answer all my calls and tell me exactly what to do. And I was a little bit disappointed that he kind of gave me situations in which I had to make some of my own decisions. Sometimes he didn't pick up the phone and it made me call someone else. Sometimes he didn't answer my questions. Sometimes he put them back to me. And it forced me to go into prayer meditation. I used to go on walking meditations and think, and he didn't actually make decisions for me. He said, you make a decision, right? He said, what does it say in the third step? We made a decision, right? And he reminded me that if we make mistakes, we have a process by which we can review our conduct. We can take it through a nightly review. We can make amends. But he empowered me to be the driver of my own recovery ship. And for that, I will forever be truly grateful. I do believe that there are people in AA who want to outsource all their thinking to someone else, and that could be helpful, but that wasn't helpful to me. I needed someone who was going to show me the literature, teach me how to interpret it, teach me how to go through the process, take other people through the process, and essentially carry the message to me that I didn't need him. So grateful for that incredible sponsor. There were times when I felt like I needed to do some step work, and I didn't wait for my sponsor to tell me that it was okay, that I needed to write inventory. I just started writing inventory. You know what I'm saying? And I got very, very much empowered because I stopped being a visitor in AA. I stopped waiting for someone to save me, and I started doing the steps. I started carrying the message. I started reading inventory to people that were reading inventory to me, and I started to feel an incredible amount of hope. So I believe that AA can be very empowering. We talk about powerlessness, and we admit our powerlessness, but we go through the process to gain access to power, and we pray for power to carry out God's will. And that was super critical for me because I needed AA to be my own brand. I needed it to be my own flavor, and it started to feel as if it was. I went through everyone's workshop. Anyone that ever published a workbook, I read it. I listened to all the CDs. I listened to all the different ways that people were interpreting the steps, and I found a message that really felt like it was my own. And it's not my own because it's from 1939, but it's my own because it's my own underlines and my own experiences. You get it? And I really want to invite people to make AA feel like you are a resident here rather than a visitor. And that's what this guy did to me. He helped me feel like a resident. I didn't really feel like I belonged here until after I did a thorough fifth step and spent the hour with him. I spent the hour by myself, and I called him afterwards and I gave him an update. So me personally, I didn't have a lot of the struggles with the God idea, the way that Bill W. describes in his story. He had to go back through his life and think about all his prejudices and old ideas. I actually didn't have a lot of resistance. I wasn't someone that cynically dissected religions and believed that, God was for the weak. I always had a spirit that was seeking deep connection. And when I got to AA, I didn't have a lot of the barriers that people had. And so when I got to We Agnostics, it kind of felt like there was an argument being posed, right? It was an argument that basically, if I needed to rely on logic to make a case for God, that argument was here. And I didn't feel like I needed to be convinced. I take the position in AA, if someone's having an issue with God, I don't try to convince them. I'm not like, all right, I'm the sponsor, I'm the old timer, I'm going to talk you into why God's important. I believe that chapter 4 does a really good job in making people come to their own terms, right? And but what I did pick up in chapter 4 was the ability of my own mind to snap shut and to prevent me from having new experiences and to rely on my own thinking, right? So my thinking is where the problem lies, and I needed to go deeper, deep down where I live in what we call the spirit, the soul, core self, whatever resonates with you, and find that the power had always been there, and I just had to get unblocked. So the book told me that the point of the book is to enable me to find a power which will solve my problems. And so I'm good at philosophy. I'm good at morality. I understand principles, but I didn't have it deeply internalized to where it would drive me. And when I say deeply internalized to where it would drive me, I mean being able to sit quiet, get a meditative signal, get an intuition, and then trust it. There's a big difference between praying and meditating, doing inventory, coming to some conclusions, and then starting to doubt it again. I learned that me doubting my own intuition was actually my agnosticism. I was doubting the power of God working in my life. So I started to see that if I was clear, if I was sober, if I was actively working the steps, if I had made a round of amends, which I had done in the first year, lightweight step work, that I could actually start to trust some of the own signals that presented to me. And I believe this is a message that's in the big book. And I believe that it's lost in the fellowship because we have a lot of people that need a lot of support, and we have a lot of people that are willing to provide a lot of support. And it's my opinion, at least in my own life, that if I'm providing too much support to someone that I'm sponsoring, I might actually be doing them a disservice. When I come in as the almighty sponsor and I come in like we're going to do this together. I'm going to tell you what your defects are. I'm going to tell you exactly what to say on these amends, that I can be disempowering someone as opposed to giving them the inertia to be able to navigate this world of recovery on their own. So there's a fine balance. It says in chapter 7, remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. So I learned that balance, and I really learned when I was in chapter 4 about the realm of the spirit. It says it's broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive, or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. And, you know, I believe that inclusivity is another big part of our program. I tend to be exclusive, like I said, competitive. And when I learned that there was this realm of spirit and anyone who wanted to be in it could be in it, it was a game changer for me. I had to ask myself, do I believe that I'm eligible for the realm of the spirit? Do I believe that I can step into this realm and start acting differently, trusting my internal compass, making decisions in my life that weren't based on the assumption that if no one saw it, no one knew? With the relationship with God, I started to act under the assumption that all things mattered, all things were connected. I stopped flicking my cigarette and littering. I started to care more about the environment. I became concerned for the welfare of other people because I started to see that we're all child of God and we're all equal and that God doesn't have grandchildren. And it started to really change me. Chapter 4 told me to build my own conception of God, to lay aside my old ideas and be willing to accept something new. So even though I had some upbringing that fostered spiritual ideas and beliefs, I had to set a lot of that aside and have a new experience with the power. And the reason that it was so easy for me in the second step was because I spent a good amount of time in the first step. I spent time learning about my condition. I learned that I always return to alcohol even after a period of abstinence. For me, abstinence happens in a correctional facility. It happens in a treatment center. It happens in a hospital detox. I do not have what it takes to get sober on my own power, but I would get sober and have every reason to stay sober, and the logic in my mind would fail. And my own human power would fail, and I would always return to alcohol, and it would always get messy. So based on my experience in the first step, I ran to step 2. I was sold. I was so crystal clear on this path that was ahead of me. And I got to be honest with y'all, it wasn't just because I wanted to stay sober and I wanted to learn how to be useful in my life. I was very attracted to recovery because the fellowship was very, very inviting and very attractive. I got sober in Los Angeles, and we had meetings, so many meetings, speaker meetings. I found these book meetings, literature-based meetings, fellowship meetings. Sometimes there were meetings that just felt like it was young people looking to find a date. You know what I mean? And I went to all of them, you know, and they all made me very motivated to stay sober and to just like be someone. I remember thinking I have no idea where recovery is going to take me, but I have a pretty clear idea of where drinking is going to take me. What's going to happen when I take my first drink? I don't believe that I know that it's going to be this quote unquote phenomenon of craving, that I'm going to like tear my life down. But I do know that eventually it'll get to a place where I'm in darkness. Eventually, I do know that I will be back in the cave of self, unable to access spirit. So I just became curious. In my opinion, the second step is just becoming curious. The question that I remember being posed to me is, am I willing to believe things could be different? If my data suggests that things are always going to be the same, if I draw on my personal experience and it suggests that when I leave this treatment center, I'm going to try drinking again, it's going to return me to old behaviors. If all the evidence that I have suggests that it's going to end poorly, I have to be willing to accept that things could be different. And I have to do some things that are going to allow things to be different. I call it stirring the pot and shuffling the deck. You know, sometimes the steps is just about shuffling the deck. I've been sober a long time, and I don't feel like, you know, I needed this last piece of inventory. I'll be honest. Like, I feel strong in my recovery. I did it because I'm part of a workshop where we're committed to working the steps at least once a year. And I did it because I wanted to shuffle the deck, just move the energy around, take a third step, do some praying, see what comes, maybe make a list of people that I can do some cleanup work. I call it a to-do list, right? Which is right around the corner. And I believe in active step work. I do. Like I said, some of it's been a little bit homeworky, like I'm doing steps with my mind, but I still do it so that I feel like I am committed and engaged to a specific way of life outlined in the book Alcoholics Anonymous from 1939, cover page to 164. And I do not believe in stopping at page 103. I believe those last 4 chapters are potent and very important for integration into our homes, occupations, and affairs. So, yeah, I got to this place on page 53 where it said, I had to face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? I'm a big believer in challenging binaries and like rigid ways of thinking, like yes, no, it's either this or that. I believe in gray areas. I believe in intersectional spaces. I believe in nuance. My entire career is dedicated to nuance, right? And for some reason, this rigid message was super supportive of me going through the big book. It's like, you just make a choice. Just make a choice. In other words, go all the way in. Become sold on the ideas contained in this book. And by doing that, I felt like I had reason to change my behavior, reason to keep going, reason to keep growing. And I looked at my capacity for worship in different areas of my life. I'm on page 54. It says, have we not variously worshiped people, sentiments, things, money, and ourselves? I saw that I was a worshiper of my own thinking. I was materialistic. I liked things, and that it was pretty easy for me to transfer my trust and my faith from all the third dimensional things and enter what we call the fourth dimension of existence. And just to start live a life that is, I like to use the word abandonment, right? Where I trust things that don't go well have meaning. I no longer try to chase the meaning. You get that in the spiritual life? We're like, oh, there was a hidden meaning there. This happened because of this. I don't know what the meaning always is, but I always know that there's meaning there, and I know that more will be revealed. And I was able to have powerful experiences in the second step, realize that my condition only seemed hopeless. And then for me, I ran through the steps with this guy, pretty rapidly. A couple weeks in inventory, 6, 7, 8, 9, made a round of amends, and then I started sponsoring a lot of people. When I got sober in 2006, I had 5 felony convictions. I had never had a real job. Most of my stuff was in storage, and I was very, very concerned about how I was going to get out of debt, what I was going to do professionally, and how I was going to find my way in mainstream society. And I remember talking to people in AA, the old timers that looked like they had been sober 20 years, that found a career, had a cool car, married, settled down. And I remember wanting to pick their brains and talk to them after the meeting. And low key, I'm hoping one of them is going to say, hey man, I think you're awesome. That was a great 3-minute share. I want to give you a job. Right. And I kept talking to people and being like, what did you do? And I remember people said, hey man, you got to find your way. You just got to stay helping people and let that feeling of usefulness convert into some other areas of your life. And I didn't like those messages. Again, I wanted people to come save me, right? A big part of my own spiritual journey, and hopefully this can help someone out there. And I say this with love, okay? No one's coming to save you. It's not, no. We need to learn how to set aside assumptions, right? We need to learn how to get busy and to start making a difference. A lot of us have wounds, traumas that make it difficult to do step work, make it difficult to trust people, make it difficult to form deep social ties, make it difficult to feel connected to a group, right? And a big part of the healing work in AA is getting involved with other people, being inclusive, right? Learning how to care about people that I otherwise wouldn't like, right? And learning how to invite people out to eat and do all the things. So the combination of step work, the fellowship, and then, of course, service commitments really does do a wonder on the alcoholic mind and on the disconnected spirit. And y'all did a number on me. I got panels. I had panels for many, many years, and it was a really big part of my journey. I do like sharing. And panels are always fun for me. I could go out and test out my material. and then go run it at the big meeting. I have enjoyed speaking, and I'll say one of the reasons that I like speaking in AA is because it's led me to helping people outside of the meeting. It's helped me get people into the workshop that I've led for 10 years. And I think most importantly, I like it because it really is spirit guided and intuitive. I don't have a canned pitch. If you've heard me before, I'm unpredictable, y'all. I just talk from the heart. I don't prep anything. I just show up in AA and let the spirit move me. And I find that to be really, really significant. And it demonstrates that my recovery is real. It's not a scripted canned pitch that I offer over and over again and edit it out based on the time that I have. My recovery is real and it's in the moment. And I am no longer here trying to manage the impressions that I give you. I did that for many years. Wanted you guys to think how awesome I was. I tell the truth now. I do. I'm not like here to make sure I get invited to another talk. I'll share with you exactly where I'm at. You know what I mean? Because I'm less invested in my AA identity. And that's a result of having other identities. You know what I mean? Getting back into the mainstream of life, going back to school, finishing an undergrad, going back to a graduate program. I was able to get a master's degree, started working. At 8 years sober, I paid off my last debt. Took me 8 years to get back to zero, y'all. I had a felony DUI and with a great bodily harm and a hit and run, and I was sued. And I had a felony stick and I had a civil judgment against myself. I owed 80 grand when I got sober. Can you imagine someone that just had a mind hijacked by alcohol in the rave scene, and now I'm sober with felonies and a bunch of debt? What am I going to do? And I was in a rush and there was pressure. Like, I got to start working. I got to start making money. And I'm very fortunate. And I want to say this. I come from a socially advantaged family. I do. I was very fortunate to get some support so that I could do a lot of AA in those first few years before I really got busy working. You know what I'm saying? And I know that other people don't have that opportunity. And for that, I want to be really, really grateful. I had a chance to go to 3 meetings a day for a few months. You know what I'm saying? I had a chance to just go to the gym, and I started working. My first job in recovery was a personal trainer. And then I started working as a tutor. And then I was working 2 jobs, really learning how to manage my schedule as I went through graduate school. And so when I started working, really, really working, I was saving all my money. I had to sell a car in early recovery. I had to make payments every year. And I was broke for the first 8 years of my recovery. And I just want to say that if anyone's having financial difficulties, 1 grain of sand at a time, you can move forward. I paid off the money from working. And very, very big pivotal turning point for me at 8.5 years sober when I put the last check in the mail. Because the woman was a secretary for a civil law firm, and I hurt her in a car accident. The injuries were minor, but the lawsuit was major. Needless to say, I didn't just put the last check in the mail. I contacted her, and I was able to track her down. And she said that she was waiting for me, and that she had been rooting for me, and that she knew that I was sober, and that she had been following me. And it was such a moving moment because I knew at that point that I was like back to zero, and that my real recovery would start. When I got off of paperwork, when I say paperwork, I mean discharge from a PO at 3.5 years sober, I felt like my recovery was beginning. When I made that last financial amends and got back to $0 at 8.5 years, I had this strong feeling like my recovery was just beginning. And I try to remember that no matter where I'm at in the, I can get into the good stuff. It was always just a beginning. And that's part of our sort of original message. Okay, so let's see. At 10 years sober, I started to get some real adversity. I had a pink cloud for those first 10 years, and it was a lot of easygoing. I remember listening to people in their teenage years talking about loss, talking about mental health issues, and I remember thinking like, I'm probably not going to have any of those. God loves me. But guess what? God's love shows up for me in the adversity. I started having health issues. I had some precancerous stuff on my face. I had a bodybuilding injury. I started getting eczema. I started having the kind of challenges that forced me into a level of spiritual growth. And I always led the workshop and tried to help people, and it just kept me tethered to AA. I eventually my mom started to decline in her 60s. My mom has full-blown dementia now, and that has been a wild ride in the last 7 years. She lives in a memory care not far from where I live. I did end up getting into a PhD program, which was a real ride in itself. I was working full time. I did not get financial aid, and I had to become sort of a machine, and I'm really proud of the work that I've done in the academic world and in the clinical world. But I also realized that I was working overtime to try to compensate for wounds of, yesteryear, losing a lot of time drinking, losing a lot of time going to treatment centers, correctional facilities. And I was driven by this strong drive to catch up. I took inventory a couple years, and I realized that I have this assumption that I'm always behind and that I kind of messed up a lot of opportunities in my life, and I had to work really hard just to get back to somewhere. And it took me a lot of years to realize that I need to work on being okay with just the way things are. I'm actually not behind. I'm actually not behind at all. I'm doing fantastic. I was able to, I struggled a lot in the program. I had some PTSD symptoms, and, it got really, really challenging for me. I was not sleeping well and having a lot of health challenges, but I was able to pull it off. You guys kept rooting for me, told me to keep on keeping on, keep sponsoring people, try to help people. And the hope that I accumulated in those first few years of recovery has carried me. So every time I go back through the book, I'm looking for new messages of hope, new messages of recovery. And I don't just find them in my own life. I look for them in other people. When I'm in an AA meeting and the speaker's bothering me, I know that there's something wrong with me. When I'm in an AA meeting and the speaker is coming across like a child of God, and everything they say is meant to be, I know that I'm okay, and I know that I'm right where I'm supposed to be. When I'm in the grocery store and the person's blocking the entire aisle and I'm mad at them because they don't realize that I'm right behind them, I know that I'm off. And when I'm in the grocery store and I see someone doing their thing and I become curious about their life and I see a child of God, I know that I'm on. For me, it's about learning how to be patient. For me, it's learning about how to be tolerant, trusting, and realize that there are no hurries and there are no worries. And that's my spiritual work. I did finish my doctorate. I've published a lot of papers in the scientific community, stuff related to brain health and other facets of human health. And I do science, and I do work with people, and I have the kind of job that I can't wait to do. I wake up in the morning and I'm excited. I feel very, very blessed. I was able to finally settle down. That was like the last frontier, right? Like finding love, starting a family. And that's been where I've been at in the last few years. I got married a few years ago. We have a 2-year-old, and now we have a 3-week-old, and things are different. Things are very, very different. You guys told me that recovery had to be portable. It had to be something that I could take with me. It wasn't just a thing that I talked about. It was a thing that I had to practice. So for me, recovery shows up when it's my turn to be with the kids, when it's my turn to show up at my mom's memory care and be there. And I don't always do it perfectly. In fact, sometimes I'm in a rush. Sometimes I feel like I need to get back to work. I've definitely struggled with some workaholic tendencies. I like to get caffeinated and stay up real late and clean out my inbox. It's just like, it gets, you know what I mean? It gets painful. But I learned that when I do it from a place of usefulness, I'm on the right path. When I do it from a place of woundedness, that I'm just, working to compensate, and today I don't feel like I need to compensate. I feel like I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. Even if I don't get a good night of sleep, I feel like I'm able to show up for the next day, do what I got to do. I have a toolkit that I can use to get back to what I call spiritual fitness. and I use the steps. I try to do a morning meditation as much as possible. I try to do a process in the evening where I do a constructive review, and I like to thank God when I can. I try not to pray for my own selfish needs. If I do have something to request, I think about how it could bear usefulness to others, and I try to thank God for what I do have ahead of time, and just stay grateful for what already is, and try not to think about the life that I'm going to get in the future, but the life that I have today. So you guys blessed me. You guys showed me the way. You showed me how to live a life full of purpose, meaning, and direction. You guys taught me how to be useful. And as a result of my usefulness, I'm able to try to be useful in other areas of my life. And then I get to feel full. I get to feel like I have a life that's worth living. Thank you.
I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic. And thanks for a beautiful share, David. Now, this brings us to the Q&A. If you would like to raise your virtual hand and come in with a question for David, please do. There's a meeting after the meeting if you would like to share on what's on your mind and anything else. I'd just like to say before we start, in terms of my recovery, one of the major things is participation for me, and it's essential that I keep participating and joining in any conversation or question. So please come in and raise your hand and participate. So who would like to come in first, please? Jax, would you like to come in for a question for David?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. I'm Jax, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much, David, for that talk. My question is, it's for any sponsees, really, that are struggling to believe in a higher power. How have you ever dealt with that to try and convince them to believe and to be willing to believe in a higher power?
Yeah, thank you. I actually stopped trying to convince people of that. I think it can be counterproductive because I realize that I'm using my own mind to try to reach them through their mind. And, if I'm strategic, I can pose an argument that will be productive, but I can also create barriers. So what I do is I tell someone to just go through the process. I let chapter 4 do that job. But really what I tell people is in terms of the second step, if you want to, if you're looking to come to believe, I say find out in 12. Let's just go through the steps and you'll find out how the energy moves you throughout. I hear a lot of people get tripped up on the second step, I have to believe in a higher power or define something. The book says we can never fully define and comprehend that power, which is God. And I found that trying to use the mind, pre-inventory, pre-amends is somewhat silly. The whole idea of the second step is to be open and to plant the seed of possibilities, to have some hope. And that's it. And the second step is just willing to believe that things could be different. So my favorite line is find out in 12. Find out in 12. Let's go through the steps and more will be revealed.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Jax, for your question. Mary, would you like to come in, please?
Yes. Hi, everybody. David, thank you so very much. I was so intrigued with your share and your insights. I mean, I was trying to write. I couldn't even get half of them. They were just, surefire, bam, bam, bam. I was curious as to what your PhD is in.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a nutritionist. I have a PhD in public health and a minor in health psychology. And I do research on eating disorders and food addiction.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I could really connect with you not only as an alcoholic, but also as I'm a nursing professor and my specialty is psychiatric nursing. And the more that I learned, even in med-surg, the more I learned about the body and what a magnificent piece of machinery it is. I just thought, even though it's all science, how could you not believe in a higher power? Who could create such a thing but a higher power? So anyway, I just loved your share. Thank you so very much.
when I studied gut bacteria and all the invisible microorganisms that live in us and on us, like the power of God came through so clearly to me.
100%. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. We have a question from the chat, and it is, when you have subtly taken your will back, what has alerted you to that fact?
Please repeat.
When you have subtly, S-U-B-T-L-Y, taken your will back, what has alerted you to that fact?
So I'll start with this. I do believe that there's some banter in AA about self-will versus God's will, and that has never resonated with me. It does, something I read tonight is like, God is everything. And so sometimes God's will means that I'm going to be in self, right? That I'm not going to just live in God's will all the time. If God is everything, there's going to be some natural movement to what I call the cave of self versus the sunlight of the spirit. And so I sort of build that uncertainty into my conceptual model to expect that I'm going to go back into what some people would call self-will. And the way that I know personally is that I'm impatient and I am like rushing, and I'm rushing because I only care about my own needs, right? That's what self-will looks like to me. I don't have a lot of bandwidth for other people because I feel like I need to focus on myself, and it feels really uncomfortable, especially when you have a wife and kids. You know what I'm saying? It's really uncomfortable when I'm just concerned about me. And I can build the case that but I'm doing this for our family and yada, yada, yada. But self-will feels like my to-do list has gotten really short because I believe myself to be the most important person.
Thank you, David. Rasa, would you like to come in next, please?
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I absolutely would. And I just want to thank David again for his share and marvel that he is a nutritionist, because somehow I thought that your PhD was in some area of psychology rather than nutrition very close to my heart.
I blended the two.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah.
But so my question is actually directly related to what you said at the very beginning, that you blend spirituality and science. Can you illustrate, please?
Yeah, thank you. I think we gave a perfect example earlier, like, when I studied biochemistry, you look at like how, bonds are attracted to others and repel others. You're like, wait a minute, right? Like there's a natural intelligence to where these things connect and these things repel. And you start to study how there's a whole world of just invisible life, right? Someone said spirituality is undescribed science, right? So instead of thinking about things as an either or, I try to think about things as a both and, right? So, but like to give more clear examples, there's actually quite a bit of science that studies the effect of meditation on the brain, right? There's a lot of studies that show how social support, if you guys look at the scientific literature for alcohol and addiction recovery, one of the most, effective things is social support. People that are around other people that understand them. And in many ways, that's what we do here in AA. So instead of looking for something as being kind of unexplained and, oddball in the spiritual realm, and then looking for things as factual in the scientific realm, I look for science and spirituality, and I look for spirituality and science. And a lot of people in my world, in the research world, have what I call like, the God of science, to where they only believe things that are documented by the evidence. And I'm smart enough to know that there are certain things that either are difficult to document, difficult to study, or maybe we just haven't got there yet.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Rasa, for your question. Kathy, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Tom. And thank you very much, David, for coming today. It was such a newness about your share. So thank you, and a lot of interesting stuff, and sparked a curiosity for sure for me. My question is, you mentioned being rigid, and I totally identify with that. Did that change? Has that changed? And how did it change? Just particularly in maybe doing step work, daily disciplines, and life, like how, like if it did.
I missed a part of it. I got the gist, but you said, can you repeat it for me, please?
Sure. So, did the rigidity change from early recovery to latter, and how?
Yeah. I spend a lot of my time thinking about rigidity versus fluidity and flexibility, and I've actually done some writing on it. I believe that for some people, rigidity is not like just a choice, but it's a neurochemical sort of imbalance. And I also know that rigidity is also linked to trauma. So when a lot of times when we have exposure to trauma and early life adversity, it forces us into safety seeking and decision making, and very clear, like us versus them, like it's either this or that. We call it black and white thinking. So I am someone that has a background genetically and also through my lived experiences that would foster a more rigid phenotype, a more rigid way of being. And I brought that into AA, and it was extremely fruitful for me because I was able to go all the way into the steps, like the maniac waving my big book at the big meeting, telling people that they're doing it wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like it was very rigid. You know what I mean? Like I would go to meetings ready to fire shots at the sponsors who were using the 12 and 12, just like insane, right? And it was super, super helpful to me. And then as I stayed sober, and I think I healed a lot of my trauma, and I grew up, I saw that my rigidity wasn't necessarily helpful to me anymore, that it was more so something that was preventing me from being useful. And so, through the process of being a scholar, and then also seeing how rigidity was playing out in my field, professional field, as well as in the political, world, it's just like pick a side, this or that. I started to see how damaging rigidity can be to, social health and relational health. And then, of course, having children, made a huge difference for me. So I don't believe that I could have thought my way out of rigidity at 5 years sober, but I do believe that after doing many, many years of healing work, like I've become a less rigid person, and it's a beautiful thing. It's also, it's like rigidity helps you stay sober. If you think about like staying sober, like none means none. Like by definition, recovery from alcoholism is rigid. You know what I mean? So I do understand the rigidity, and I actually understand it and support it, and will always hope to have some of it. But I don't believe that being a long-term sober, rigid member of AA is helpful, nor does it resonate with my spirit. So I'm more in the spot of like, you do you, and it doesn't bother me what other people do. And I understand that there will always be varying perspectives and varying ways to just do things and to move through the world. And so, yeah, I'd love to share a piece I wrote of how I overcame the rigidity of my mind. I think there's a lot there that we should be possibly discussing in advanced topics in AA.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Kathy, for your question. Scott, I know you're wanting to come in, but I know Carl was wanting to come in. Carl, did you have your hand raised for a question?
I did, but it wasn't a question. It was just to say, obviously, I've just done my step one, and hearing David tonight with that speak, that share, I really took some things because my step two is next, and I seen it were a question and answer, so I just I lowered my hand back down.
Cheers, Carl. Thank you.
No problem.
Scott, you'll be the last question, please, and then we'll bring it to an end.
Hi, I'm Scott, about alcoholic. David, thank you for your share. Very, very inspiring. Do you know when you said you go through the whole book, you said with sponsees?
Yeah, I do it in a workshop now. I spent the first 8 years of my life taking everyone page to page, cover page to 164.
Yeah.
And now I just do a workshop once a week. And I found that if I'm trying to read the book with everyone, I get burnt out, and it didn't work for me. I've read the foreword to the first edition 1,000 times and I lose my potency. So now I just set aside 90 minutes a week to go through the book, and whoever's able to show up, we just do it that way. And that seems to work really well because I preserve my potency. If I'm trying to just do it every day, I did it for years. I found that I didn't get enthusiastic about it. Now I go through the book once a year and I'm super enthusiastic about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for your question, and thank you, David. That brings us to the end of Q&A. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and thank you for a beautiful meeting. I will now hand the meeting back over to Rasa. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you to everyone who participated in the Q&A. A couple of our service members will stay after the meeting to practice our 12-step and connect with you. If you are new to Alcoholics Anonymous, please stay after the meeting so we can offer sponsorship, answer any questions you may have, and get you the literature you need to recover. If anyone would like to share, or if you are experiencing challenges, please stay after the meeting and allow us to support you. We would love to hear from you and get to know you. I have asked Carl to read the third step promises.
Thanks, Rasta.
Oh God.
My name's Carl, alcoholic. Just like to say thank you, David, for that share. And I'm going to read the first statement promise. It's on page 62 and 63 in your big book. This is how and why of it. First of all, we have to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided to hereafter in this drama of life. God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is our father. We are his children. Most ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumph arch through which we passed to freedom. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had new employer being all-powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. Our little plans and designs more and more became interesting in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flowing and we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, and we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear today, tomorrow, a year after we were reborn. Thanks. I'd like to send the meeting notes check for scribe report.
Thank you very much, Carl. Hi everyone, I'm Jax. I'm an alcoholic. I would like to thank our speaker, David, today. Thank you very much, David. We truly appreciate the sacrifice you've made for the service. And I would also like to thank our Addition by Subtraction service team for your awesome job. Today we had Rasa on host. We had Tamara on slides and chat. We had Aaron and Tom on security and Tom doing the Q&A. And we also have readers, Tommy and Carl, and also me, your girl Jax, who did the sobriety count. I'd like to acknowledge our celebrants today, who were Mel, celebrating 34 days, and our very own Tom, who celebrated 140 days. Well done, everybody. And thank you to all the folks who participated in the Q&A. We had Mary, Rasa, Kathy, Carl, and Scott. And lastly, I would like to thank all of you for those who had their cameras on today. You were of service to our speaker and to our other AA members in the room, so it's much appreciated. I'd like to now turn the meeting over to David, who would like to close us out with any final comments. and to follow on with the Lord's Prayer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me today and connecting with your group. I deeply appreciate the opportunity. Let's do the Lord's Prayer. Hopefully you guys